All right, good afternoon. Let's get to it. So this week, one of the things that you guys have to do is this 1.2 Intro to the GOW, the graph of the week. You have a handout, and the handout goes with this slideshow. So I'm just going to kind of quickly walk through this slideshow. The handout does kind of that same thing. So I'll pull this to the side and kind of pull this to the side. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, normally it does. Let me try to be slick and it did not work. But the handout usually just kind of pairs with these slides over here. And really the goal here is this is a skill that a math teacher, Kelly Turner, has started doing with her classes several years ago. And what she does is she has her students look through these graphs each week. And as she does that, she has them to start looking for this skill called visual literacy. And then she has them doing writing in her math class every week. And we want you kind of doing that same sort of thing. We want you to start looking through these graphs and you know how to graph, you know how to do all of these math skills. But what we want you to do is start thinking about how do these math skills also equate to things that you can think of and have discussions about, have the discussion and have the kind of interpreting what else is going on and have discussions about the stuff that's happening in these graphs and have kind of some just talk about what's going on in this kind of informational setting. So how do you analyze the kind of data that is going on? So literally starting with graphs and thinking further than just the numbers that are there. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. So if you follow along this handout, it literally just kind of goes slide by slide. So you start just with a very basic graph, like, okay, here's a graph. If you look at this graph, what might be going on? What information are you missing? Think about if you just have lines and bars and numbers, what more do you need? And you can start in just kind of some numeric and mathematical terms. And what you're going to do is just kind of think your way through and just start typing. Start typing about what you're missing and what you want. Just describe. And then just kind of keep going. We'll start adding pieces into the graph as we go. You'll start getting more and more as you go along. We'll give you some kind of instruction up here, and then we'll add more to the graph as we go along. So what could your x-axis and your y-axis represent? So start thinking about, what have we added to the graph itself here? What else is going on? And then what does adding graphics or flavor text, other stuff, help you do as you're interpreting what's going on in the actual graph itself? So we've got some graphics here. You've got some other stuff going on. And then we'll continue to add more to the graph itself. We'll start adding things on as well. You get some more here. Do you have enough information to finally figure things out? And then we start thinking about, okay, now that you have a complete chart or graph or infographic, what else can you actually get from this? It's not just the statistical data. What else can you pull from here? What observations can you make about that graph? Start looking more at it. Where is your source? You have some source information up here. You have source information down here. You have a lot going on in this piece down here. You have a lot of information in this little italicized bit. You have your Pew Research is your source. You have quantities along the bottom. You have X and Y information. You have visual stuff that you can be looking at. You have things indicated by different colors. You have a title. All of this is information that is helping you figure things out. So you have topic information and you have X and Y stuff that you can be figuring out. You have observations that you can be making out. You can start making predictions. You can do a lot of different stuff. So then kind of start thinking about, okay, what else can you start discussing? How can you go a little bit further? You can do a lot more once you have kind of this full, complete piece. So take some actual time and really do some kind of analysis. Do you have enough information now to kind of figure everything out? How can you extend your information and think further? What might be missing? Start looking at, when is your information from? This is from June 2018. How does that impact the information that you have? What is on here that maybe is obsolete because it's 2018 information? What is it missing because it's 2018? How can all of this impact the reflection that you're having? Okay. And then there's some other things that it asks you to think about. Top social media trends for 25, moving forward. And then it says, okay, let's try some more. So we have some additional, let's keep going. We have another graph. Thinking about, okay, Americans waiting longer to tie the knot. So we've got one, again, we've got flavor text up here. We can look down here, we can look for our source. We don't really have a date on this, but we can look for our data. And if our chunks down here in our x-axis seem to be decades, then it looks like our data is probably cutting off 2005-ish. So it's not necessarily the most relevant or recent data. This data might be 10, 15, 20 years old. So what does that mean for our data? Okay, what do these X and Y axes represent? What are the observations we can make? What does this mean for trends in data? Think about those things as we're kind of moving forward. What does all of that stuff, mean for us? What are our topics? What observations can we make? Visual cues. Think about artistic elements. How is this stuff represented for us? Does this trend lead us to predictions? If this was in the early 2000s, what does that trend mean for the next decade after this data? Maybe in our kind of right now in the 2020s, what does it mean for the next 10 years? Does this track with right now? Like if this trend is moving upwards, does it track with kind of the shifts right now? Maybe you want to kind of do a quick Google search and see what's the average age for marriage right now. There's a lot of different things that you can do. So again, kind of keep writing here, write a few sentences that describe what you're seeing, what information can you glean, what do you infer. You've also got, this is actually two graphs kind of in one big chunk. You also have this percentage of men and women who are never married down here at the bottom. It may not be a XY axis graph like we're used to seeing it, but you also still have statistical information down here, graphical information down here. It's just presented in a different way. This information is from 2003. So maybe that's when all of this information is from, right? We've got this little 1, 2, 3 kind of tick marks. So that's kind of where our info kind of seems to cut off from. We're tracking from men and women averages from the 1970s to 2003. So, what is that kind of trend? What are you noticing about the percentages from these ages and these age groups? This seems to be, if we were going to plot this on an X and Y axis, which of the axes would you put each of these on? These are grouped differently, but you could put this on an X and Y. They're just presented a little differently. Okay. The last thing that it's asking you to do on here is kind of extending this into going out and finding something that interests you. Just going and finding some other stuff. Think about something that interests you and go out and look for something that is presented statistically in data analysis and maybe some graphical pieces. What is anything that interests you? Find using some of the sources. You got a link right here, and I put it into Google Classroom as well. You have a lot of these really great sources that give you tons and tons of ways to look up data. And we'll go over these at a different time in another assignment. But you can check out any of these sources, or if you just want to Google, you can start Googling for graphs or infographics or any of those kinds of sources. So look for some sort of line chart, pie chart, bar graph, infographic, graph, statistical information. Try and find something that's pretty recent and anything that presents graphical information that shows something that you're interested in, and copy and paste that graph here, and then just kind of think about some of these questions and what does that show you, and what can you infer from that graph, and just do a little bit of reflection on it. So all we're really doing here is you're just trying to kind of think about how do we pull information from data and how do we think about data. We're so used to seeing stuff like this and just thinking about it in terms of like, oh, it's math, let's think about math and be done with math. But how can information presented like this spur conversation? How can this be something that we think about and analyze and turn into stuff that we interpret and think about? And that is kind of the goal of this first unit. So hope that helps and have fun.